Okay, I'm going to cut another quilt to start kitting it, or I bought a kit, and it's for this quilt, Log Cabin Americana by Franklin Quilt Company, FQC 036. That's the original pattern. ShabbyFabrics.com kitted it up in this fabric line, which is Liberty Lane. So I thought I would show you what their kits look like in case you've never ordered from ShabbyFabrics.com. But it came all packaged really nicely in a nice priority envelope, or actually a box. And there's a nice letter from Shabby Fabrics. This was included, and this was included. This is the original pattern that they took theirs from. This includes cutting instructions for this fabric line, so that's why it's separate from the quilt pattern, but this tells how to fully assemble everything. So I thought I would show the different fabrics in this line. So I'm going to open it up here. Doing this one-handed. So everything is neatly folded, and I'm going to open it up. And so we've got the red here. That's another fabric in this line. So those are those two fabrics. So those are probably half yard a piece. And again, this is the first time I've taken them out of the package. And then this fabric, isn't that beautiful? Very patriotic. This is probably a yard. We've got dark blue, solid-ish. It's tone and tone. And then we've got this stripe here, and this fabric, this fabric, and then this one that I showed, this is going to be the center of the stars. Let me pull that up. So the center of all of the squares here is this lovely fabric. So that's probably a fat quarter, fat quarter. This is probably half a yard here. Yeah, I bet that's a half yard. And this fireworks, which is right here, and used elsewhere. So again, the fabric sizes would be in the original pattern. But I bought this as a kit. I got it for Mother's Day. And so now I want to cut it. I've been just drooling over cutting this, and I finished my daughter's quilt, so I can do that. Here's another in the line, just beautiful fabrics. Again, I'm trying to do this one-handed, so please bear with me. This is probably, it's not a full yard, it's probably 3/4 of a yard maybe. And so we have that. I love how they must have cut these together, and then how they packaged them. Everything is just packaged so neatly and ready for me to press and cut tomorrow. So this one, this lovely stripe, which actually goes here in the border, and that's probably, I think these are mostly with the fabric. And this lovely star again. So yeah, these are just beautiful fabrics. I don't know how many is in this line, so I'm not sure, but they figured it out. So I'm trying to refold my map, so to speak. And then there's this lovely red, which goes here, and I think it might also be the binding. I'm trying to get all the fabrics in order. And then this is the light color that you see here. You see my finger here and here. So this is the light. And then open this up again. Oh no, let me go back. There we go. So some more fabrics that will be used in the log cabin box. Okay, so this goes here, and it's probably the binding, and then the cream, and then the blues that we saw go in this area here. I saw this quilt when she showed it on a video on her YouTube channel, and I was like, yeah. And then this lovely piece of fabric, which is probably used in this area here. Make sure you're seeing this. And then we've got the lovely blue stars and fireworks. That's this border. So there's 3 borders. There's the inner border, middle border, and outer border, and this is the borders. So this has got to be more than a yard. I haven't, it's the first time I took these out, but I've been wanting to play with them for a while. So I thought what I would do is just show you, in case you've ever wondered how do their kits come from Shabby Fabrics. I love their website. And it's the first kit I've ordered from them, but I'm very impressed. Plus this, the original, it was in a little zippy bag here. I just took it out so I could read the directions. That was in there. This was tucked in there because this is the cutting directions. And when I say the cutting directions, what I mean is that they took a picture of each fabric and said, this is what you need to cut of each fabric. And then they give you a general layout. So when you get that far. So I'm very, very impressed. I will be ordering kits from them in the future. And I love the letter from them. And again, this is shabbyfabrics.com. They also have a YouTube channel. And I think this was shown on one of their YouTube videos, which is how I first saw it. So I'm just going to work on getting these cut, the pieces all cut, and then start assembling the quilt, and I will just do kind of a vlog style as I assemble this quilt. So I hope you have a good day. Talk to you later. Bye. Hi YouTube. I thought I would do an update of this particular pattern, Log Cabin Americana, in the Liberty Lane fabrics. This was kitted for me by shabbyfabrics.com, and I have just finished all the cutting on this beautiful quilt. It'll be a lap size quilt. I'm going to show you the fabrics. So we have the flags. That's going to be the center of our stars, of our blocks. We have this red texture, which is going to be the binding and the flying geese. This light blue with words, or this Americana here, that's also going to be for the flying geese. This blue strip is for the log cabin block, as is this one and this one. Over here we have, this is the borders, border number 1 and border number 3. Let me show that to you. So here's border number 1, 2, and 3. So this is border 1 and border 3. And it's also used in the log cabin blocks up here. So that's what that is. This almost solid blue is used for the flying geese. Log cabin strips, log cabin strips, log cabin blocks, log cabin blocks. Our cream, log cabin blocks, and flying geese. Log cabin block, log cabin block, log cabin block, and log cabin block. No, I'm sorry, this is the second border. So this is border number 2. Now on this one, the pattern said, when you have a pattern that says width of fabric, WOF, that means selvage to selvage. This said LOF, meaning they had cut the length, but you were to cut it parallel to the selvage rather than perpendicular to the selvage. So like these strips over here, you can see I have the selvages still attached because I cut them perpendicular to the selvage. This particular fabric you cut the same direction that the selvage is going to make this beautiful quilt. And I also wanted to show, this is my scrap pile here. These are not usable. This is the leftover fabric from the kit, and I've cut everything. I'm not going to trim these down. I have kind of a system for my scraps, but I'm not going to trim these down until I have everything assembled in case I made a mistake. So there's still plenty of fabric here on the majority of those fabrics that you saw. I will say though, on this one, there was a flaw in the middle of the fabric that I had to cut around, and it's not Shabby Fabrics' fault. If I can find the flaw. It's right here. You can't see it from the front as well as you can see it from the back here. It's like a thread was pulled or something. But I was still able to work around it, and this is still salvageable for scraps. So this, if I don't need it for the quilt, because I did not make a cutting error, which I'm hoping, then I have that access. And this is all the scraps that I'm going to be throwing away from cutting all of that fabric. Excuse me. I did also want to mention that when you cut a piece of fabric, selvage to selvage, it's a really long cut, and sometimes it's hard to hold your ruler down. And I picked this up from Jordan Fabrics on one of their videos. So let's say I had this laid out, and it's a really, this is a really long cut, and you want to keep it as straight as possible. You can hold the ruler here, but down here it can wibble wobble. She showed that when she had her ruler out, where did I put my ruler? Here it is. This is a 6.5 by 24 inch ruler. She had it on there, and then when she was cutting, she took a 5-pound weight and she just stuck it on the end just to give her a little more hold of the ruler. And I did that on all of these pieces, the large pieces, and it worked very, very well. So if you ever have an issue, I'm always nervous of, cutting, and then all of a sudden the ruler will slip. And this is a good tip that I picked up from her videos, and I wanted to pass it on. Again, that was jordanfabrics.com. They have tutorials on their YouTube channel, and they have a website. So again, this fabric was an entire kit from shabbyfabrics.com. Let's get it to focus. There we go. And so if you're wondering about the kits, would you run out of fabric? Would you have extra in case you made a mistake? I will say yes, the majority of the fabrics I would. And so now I get to start sewing this. I will say that when I pressed it, I pressed all my pieces before I cut them. I love using Mary Ellen's Best Press, this clear starch. Some of the starches that are in the cans, some of the propellants irritate me and irritate some of my kids, our asthma, and so I like using this instead. It's just a pump bottle. I prefer the unscented, but they didn't have the unscented. This is not overwhelming of a scent, but I just wanted to throw that out. I will also be using, when I make the flying geese blocks, that's the first part of this project. I am going to be using my Tucker tool from studio180.net, and I'm going to be using her wing clipper. I'm covering up my name. I have a label on this. Her wing clipper. This is wing clipper number 1, and it does 1 inch and 1/2 inch flying geese blocks. And watch her YouTube channel. I'll link it below, and she walks you through how to use this tool. I find these tools very handy, and so I adapted this pattern slightly to be able to do the flying geese units using this tool. So that's going to be the next step, is doing those, and I'll let you see the next step when I have those all assembled. Because with a log cabin quilt, you start from the center and you work your way out, and here's one block, and here's the block with red. So it's cream on one side, red on the other, cream on one side, blue on the other. So you start from the center and you work your way out. So that's where the flying geese come in. If you can see it, they make the little star points here. That's the flying geese. Let's see, the original pattern, I think you could see it easier. This is the original pattern, Log Cabin Americana by Franklin Quilt Company. So you can see the stars a little easier. Those are flying geese units right there. So I will get to the next step and show you guys my progress. Bye. Okay, still working on Log Cabin Americana using Liberty Lane fabrics, and I'm at the next step where the centers are all done. The main difference between using the Liberty Lane versus the original pattern is that the original pattern had you have the center and all of these points were the same color. So what the Shabby Fabrics has done is they used a red for the points on these blocks and a different print center, and here it's the same center but they used blue points. So that's the main difference. Also, this uses blue, this uses red, but that would be the same as the original pattern. I've just kind of pulled out my Tucker trimmer number 1 to see if these are 4.5 inches, and they are pretty close. None of them are oversized and none of them are too short. So I gave them a good press, and so I'm getting ready to go on to the next step, which is starting to put the log cabin strips on. And this will be the first piece, second piece, the same color. And then you just keep going clockwise around, slowly building the block out. One thing about this particular pattern that I noticed is at certain steps they tell you this is the size your block should be, and they should be 4.5 inches. And I know that from the pattern itself, and I do appreciate that, because sometimes you wonder how square your squares are really being. So I will do the next step and come back. YouTube, I am currently working on the Log Cabin Americana Quilt by the Franklin Quilt Company. This is the original colorway, and this is the Liberty Lane fabric line. This was with these fabrics by shabbyfabrics.com, and it was purchased as a kit. So I'm working on the blocks, and I have the first full ring outside of the stars on the blues and on the reds. Now there are 4 blues and 20 of the red themed blocks, and they'll be twisted and turned in the quilt. So these, according to the quilt pattern directions, are approximately 6.5 inches. Mine are just a shade smaller. That's very common. 5 quilters could use the same machine, same fabric, same threads, and their seams would be just a wee bit different. But they're all very, very close to that 6.5 inch mark. I did trim just if there was a little bit hanging off, but I didn't trim very much at all. So this will be the next blue that goes on those 2 parts. So the next step is to put the cream on. So let me turn this way. Turn this way. So put the cream on, and this cream with the red and white and blue stars with a cream background will go on both blocks. And then this blue stripe will go on the blues on these next 2 sides here. And then this red with the white stars is going to go here. And that will be the next clip that I do of these blocks. It's coming together really well. Following the directions are very clear, the illustrations are very clear. If you're interested in stitching this pattern, or excuse me, sewing this pattern, I think you're going to really enjoy it. See you at the next step. Here's the next ring around these blocks. Again, there's 4 blue and 20 red. And so I'm done for today, and I will do the next row and bring that back to you when I stitch them. Thank you. Hi YouTube, I'm back for the next portion of my quilt, this one. And I have the next band on, so the blues and the reds. And according to the pattern, these are approximately 10.5 inches side to side and top to bottom. Mine are just a little smaller, but that's fine. And so I will check in with the next round. There's 1 more ring around each block, and then I can start assembling the center of the quilt. Okay, I'm working on the Log Cabin Americana Quilt by Franklin Quilt Company. And what you end up doing is you sew your blocks as they grow to 1 long strip of fabric. And as you can see, I have actually the 4 blue are on these strips of fabric here. Well, you want to cut between there. So even if you line up with the edge of your fabric here, you could be off at an angle. So this is my tip. Make sure that this isn't going to slide on me. Now this is obviously the end, so I only have one edge to worry about. I have an easy square junior ruler here at 6.5 inches. Doesn't matter, but you want a straight edge. And what you want is you want to, if you can see right here, going up, that's my seam between this strip and the rest of the block. You want to put the 1 1/4 inch mark from your ruler on that line. And then I'm right-handed. If you were left-handed, you would do this the other direction. Or even, I've heard, again, I'm not left-handed, but you could even cut this from the top, like you'd turn this 90 degrees. But if you're left-handed, you probably have more experience than that. But I am very right-handed, so this is how I do it. And then once this 1 1/4 inch line is lined up on my seam, it's a little off right now, let me get it lined up, then I could take my rotary cutter and trim, and that will give me an even edge. And if you do that for all the different rings, you will actually have a better, more consistent result. And that's my little tip. And then I'm going to press these and come back and show you what they look like all pressed, because this is the final strip on the final set of blocks before I assemble the center of the quilt. Okay, I've got everything pressed. So this is the Log Cabin Americana Quilt from Franklin Quilt Company, FQC 036. And this pattern, to my knowledge, is still available as of July of 2021. So I have all 20 of the red and white with the blue star blocks ready to assemble into the center, and I have all the blue and white with the red star in the center. I was asked kind of what level of quilting is this particular piece. I would say if you've never done a log cabin, try with scraps. You want to be consistent with your 1/4 inch seam, as with pretty much every other aspect of quilting. And if you've never tried a flying geese unit, try a couple of those with scraps. There are several different ways to make them. I made mine using the wing clipper from Studio 180 Designs, which is by Deb Tucker and her tool, and it made them all look really nice. Now this one, all my points didn't disappear, and I'm not always perfect on that, but you see this one kind of disappeared a little bit. But with her tool, it was so nice to use that tool again and adapt it for this particular pattern. Essentially, I had to cut my pieces just a wee bit bigger and then trim them down, but it works great. She has a tutorial on her YouTube channel on how to use her tool, and her tool, the directions are perfect. So that would be the challenge. If you've never made a flying geese unit, that would be your challenge, and try a couple with just scraps and become more comfortable with that process. Also perfecting that 1/4 inch seam, and that's something every quilter of every level needs to focus on. You want a 1/4 inch, if not just a scant 1/4. And the pattern gives you, these blocks now are approximately 12.5 inches from side to side and top to bottom. And that is what the pattern says they should be. Mine are just a wee bit smaller, and that's because of just, I'm human. And so my blocks are just a little bit different. But that's okay. They are consistent across all my blocks. I don't have one at 13 and one at 11. That little bit of size difference is consistent across all my blocks. And when I assemble it into this pattern here, I will be focused on the corners. And I've done enough quilts that I know how to line those up and everything. So that's my next step, is to build the center of this quilt, and then I will be building the 3 borders. So you have an inner border, medium border, and outer border. And then I will show you those steps after I have the center assembled. So there's 4 blocks in a row and there's 6 blocks. And the layout, again, it's how you turn the log cabin to get the stripes to go that way, because they're all identical beyond that point. And I will come back when I have that center portion done. Okay, I have gone through, excuse me, still working on the Log Cabin Americana Quilt by the Franklin Quilt Company. And I've gone through and all the rows are sewn together. So let me see if I can get this. There we go. This again is the lap size, so it's 24 blocks. So I'm still not getting all the quilt in there, but I've got the right layout. So now I need to go through and sew the rows together, and then the center will be done. And then I'll tackle the borders. What I did have to do though, as I was kind of laying this out, I went back through and all of the quilt blocks, the red and the blue ones, I made them 12 1/4 inches across. So it'll finish, this quilt will finish a little smaller than what the pattern says, but that's okay. I needed to have all of the squares the exact same size, so they sewed together nice and even, and it'll be very easy to match these type of corners because the blocks were all the same size before I sewed them together in rows. You don't have to do that, but I chose to do that. These blocks were, by the pattern, supposed to, quote unquote, be 12 1/2 inches. So mine were 12 1/4 inches square. And I just went through, and some of the blocks I had to trim a lot, some I had to trim just barely any. But now these will sew together well. They sewed as rows very well together. I just have to press them and then put the rows together, and then I will have to measure from the top to the bottom to put the top first border on and the bottom first border on, and then I'll do the same thing side to side, and I'll do that for each border. The borders on this particular quilt are not mitered, so they don't have that angle. They look like it because of the fabrics that are chosen. Particularly, there's a fabric, but it doesn't have the navy in it, and because of that stripe, it looks like the whole corner is mitered, as I was looking at the picture from these particular fabrics, because they are different than what is pictured on the front of the quilt. But next step is done. Hi YouTube, it's Diane. I'm talking about Log Cabin Americana with Liberty Lane fabrics that I purchased this kit through shabbyfabrics.com, and I have the rows fully assembled now. Let me try and get this so you can see everything. It's just hanging on my bookshelf in my room. So now what I have to do is I have to measure in the middle, side to side, and top to bottom, because that will tell me this inner border here, this first border, it will tell me how long I need to have the fabric, because standard fabric comes about 42 to 44 inches edge to edge, and this obviously will be taller than 44 inches and wider than 44 inches. That will tell me how many strips to sew together. So then I do the sides, or do I do top and bottom? I'll have to look at the directions, because then you add the sides, these long sides. Well, that's going to take more than one strip of fabric. By knowing the measurement top to bottom, I'll know how long to make those strips. And to be honest, I will probably add an inch, just because sometimes when fabric is taken up in your machine, it doesn't quite come out the exact size, and that's fine with me. So I'll do both sides, and then these long sides, and then I'll measure again across the middle, and that will tell me how much to put on the end of the first border. And then I will come back and show you what it looks like with the first border, which is this blue fabric with the multicolored stars. YouTube, it's Diane again. this quilt, Log Cabin Americana, Franklin Quilt Company, and I have been able to get, there we go, I've been able to get the second border on all the way around, and one more border, and it will be finished. Okay, let's try this again. I goofed, and I didn't do a video. Okay, so it's for this pattern, Log Cabin Americana. I thought I had done a video when I had the first border on, and then when I went back to edit, I realized I didn't have that video. I don't know, took a picture or something instead. I know I did one for the second, and now you can see the quilt in its entirety. It's, again, hanging on my bookcase here in my room, and it is beautiful. I really love it. I love these fabrics. They're Liberty Lane as the fabric line. It's very beautiful. This quilt is roughly 58 inches by 82 inches. It's lap size because this pattern has 3 different sizes. And that's not breaking copyright, because if you picked it up in a store and flipped it over, that's what you would see on the back. So this will be the binding, which is this tone-on-tone red, which is used here in these star blocks, and it is actually the points of the star in the blue, the 4 blue blocks. So this quilt has 4 blocks total. 4 of them are blue on the log cabin, and 20 of them are red, and the red have the blue points, and the blue has the red points. That was done by Shabby Fabrics with their kit. The original has the stars being all the same color, so you have choices. This particular kit from Shabby Fabrics is no longer available. They sold them out, but you could use any patriotic line and get a very similar effect with this particular pattern. And I will do one more clip to kind of wrap up the video, what I think of it, all the things, and I will talk to you in that clip that'll follow this one right now. Okay, let's try this again. This will be the final clip of this particular video, the Log Cabin Americana by Franklin Quilt Company. I received this pattern and the fabrics in a kit from shabbyfabrics.com. I would highly recommend their kits, and to my knowledge, their kits are not available anymore because they ran out, but I believe that they have this particular quilt pattern, or it's available at other sources. When I checked online, it seemed to be in stock at a few various places, so you can always check or contact the company. They are still in business. Some tools that helped me beyond a basic rotary cutter with a new blade and my cutting mat. Having the Deb Tucker Studio 180 Soothing. I've already done this, but I had forgotten to hit record like a silly person. Wing clipper tool. She also has a wing clipper 2, so it does different size flying geese units. She also has a YouTube channel where she walks you through how to use her tools, and it is well worth the watch. I've used this on other projects with flying geese units, and I really, really love this tool. And the flying geese units are all the star points here, and this pattern walks you through a more traditional way of making flying geese units, which is perfectly valid. The Tucker way, you make your units just a wee bit bigger and then you trim them down just a little bit. For myself personally, I find that my units are more consistent overall when I do that. This pattern tells you what the flying geese unit needs to, the dimensions of it before it's fully assembled. And you could take that information and then take the chart that comes with the wing clipper to know what size to cut your original blocks that are used to make the flying geese unit. And watching her video will make that make more sense. I do like her technique. I do love this tool, and I've used it on a number of things. Another tool that made it helpful was her Tucker trimmer. She has 3 different tucker trimmers. This is trimmer number 1 that does inch square up, so you can square your pieces up to the inch or the 1/2 inch. The tucker 2, I'm not sure, I don't own that, so I don't know the size of the units that are on it, but they are different than these. And she also has a tucker trimmer 3 that does, I think the largest it does is 12.5 inches. I do not own that piece either. What I do own is a Creative Grids 12.5 inch ruler, and that's just covering up my name there. Both of these became very, very handy on each step, as I would put a ring around and then I'd square up the blocks, put another ring, square up the blocks, put another ring, square up the blocks. In this pattern, it tells you what the block measurement should be at various points, and I would strongly encourage you to make sure all your blocks are even. In the end, my blocks were just a shade smaller than what they said it should be, and that's more human being than anything else, because if you have the same machine and 5 different quilters with the same fabrics, the same machine, the same threads, their margins are going to be just a wee bit different, and that's the human factor. But I did make sure all my blocks were the same size before I fully assembled them here, and it made a huge difference. So I'd encourage you to square up your blocks before you do this final block assembly. Putting the borders on was not hard, and so the piece I'm adding to the quilt is on the bottom, so it goes through the feed dogs just a little bit different. I found that my borders lay flatter that way. Another tip I would say is press, 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 press. Every step you want to press, because your overall effect will look so much better. I would also encourage you to have some kind of sizing in your piece at some point. Before I cut my fabrics, I sized them all. I used Mary Ellen's Best Press. I really like that product better than the aerosols, because the aerosols, they can irritate my allergies. Also, use steam. Don't be afraid of using steam. I used 100% cotton materials, so I'm not worried that they would shrink weird or anything. I do also want to clarify, I am not being paid for this video in any way. I'm not being paid by the Franklin Quilt Company, Shabby Fabrics, or Studio 180. These are my personal opinions. They belong to me. Sometimes when you're tackling a new project, or maybe you're just stepping into quilting, hearing somebody kind of walk you through the process, who, for lack of a better way of saying this, is not trying to sell you something, I find that very reassuring. I would say that this quilt would be between a beginner and an intermediate, but more toward the beginner. It is a basic log cabin quilt, and if you didn't want the star, you could just do a square in the center and then do rings around and rings around and rings around, and you would still get a very, very similar effect, and I think it would still look beautiful. But don't let the flying geese unit intimidate you. It is used in a lot of quilt patterns. Log cabin blocks are not boring. They can have a very, very fabulous effect. But again, these are all my own opinions. I have not been compensated at all for this video. I would purchase again from Franklin Quilt Company. I would purchase again from Shabby Fabrics, and I definitely will be adding to my tool collection from the Deb Tucker Studio 180 design. I will have links to whatever I can possibly link in here for you in the box below. I will also have my email, so if I did not answer a question you may have, feel free to email me. My plan with quilting this quilt is I think I'm going to do either all just vertical rows in the center and then stitch in a ditch around the border, or I may incorporate more stitch in the ditch all over. I'm going to do this on my home machine. I just can't do it on the particular setup I have at the moment, but I think I figured out how to do this on my home machine. but I'm thinking if it's vertical rows, it will have more that flag feel, or maybe horizontal, but just go one direction. And when I have that done, I will update the thumbnail on this video or put a picture in the box below. So again, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I plan on doing future quilts and future quilting videos, vlog style like this. This did take me probably a month and a half, but that is not because of the difficulty of the pattern or anything. That's because life happens. And if I just worked on this straight through, I think within a week this could easily be done. Again, I did the lap size. There are 3 sizes. There's the wall hanging, which is roughly 46 by 58, the lap 58 by 82, and the full size 82 by 94. So I did the lap size, and I would do it again. I do plan on sewing this up again at some point in the future, because I did like this pattern a lot, and the directions were clear, the illustrations were wonderful. So 2 thumbs up, or 2 rotary cutters up, or however you want to say it. But I will let you all go, and I hope that you have a good rest of your day, and don't be afraid to venture into the quilting world. We will accept you with open arms, and feel free to ask questions. We love to help people. Bye for now.